In this video we demonstrate how to use snapshots in cPouta to save and relaunch virtual machines. In the 3 previous videos we first launched a virtual machine to cPouta service, then installed some application software there, and finally attached a volume to this virtual machine. So let's start. From the instances view of the Pouta web interface, we can see that we have one virtual machine running. We can check the details of the virtual machine by clicking its name. We can, for example, see that there is a volume attached to this virtual machine. In the same way, if we go to the volumes listing, we can see that we have one data volume existing, and that's linked to this virtual machine which we have running. Like in the previous videos, we use here no machine virtual desktop, where we have terminal session to the Taito cluster and the web browser session running. We connect from Taito to our virtual machine using the same kind of SSH command as in the previous videos. So we use -i Pouta key to authenticate and then copy the IP address from the cPouta interface and use user account cloud user. The SSH command asks for the password we have defined for the key file we are using, and when we give it, we are inside our virtual machine in cPouta. We have already installed some software tools to this virtual machine, and there in directory /media/volume we have the virtual data volume attached. In the data volume we have directory called test data, where we have some files from our previous runs in this virtual machine, so input and output files. Next we create a snapshot of the virtual machine we are using so that we can close it, and then later on, when we want to continue doing the analysis, relaunch the same virtual machine and use the same dataset that is attached to the current virtual machine. We use the drop-down menu of the virtual machine to first disassociate the floating IP from the virtual machine, and then we use the same command menu to execute the shut-off command for the virtual machine. Shutting off the machine ensures that the machine is in the stable state when the actual snapshot command is executed. The create snapshot command locates in the same machine-specific drop-down menu as the previous commands. The snapshot creation process first asks for a name for the snapshot to be created. In this case, we will name the snapshot as my KEIM VM, as we have the KEIM software installed here in this virtual machine. And then we press the create snapshot command to start the snapshot creation process. Creating a snapshot will take quite a lot of time. Here we have cut off most of the waiting time for creating the snapshot. In this case, the creation process took so long time that we actually were logged out from the Pouta CSCFI web interface, and we had to reconnect to this interface to check if the snapshot creation was successful. If we now go to the image list of the Pouta interface, we can see that we have our virtual machine image there included in the list. Then we go back to the instances view, select our virtual machine, and use process delete instances to completely terminate our virtual machine. Deleting takes some time, but after a while we can see that our instances list is clear. We don't have any virtual machines running anymore in the cPouta environment. And then let's think that a few days later we want to use the same virtual machine again. We have already opened the terminal connection to Taito using the no machine virtual desktop, and in Taito we launched Firefox to access the cPouta user interface in address Pouta CSCFI. The overview of the cPouta project shows that there is no virtual machines here named as instances running at the moment, but there is one data volume existing still. We start the process to create a new virtual machine by going to the Instances view and there pressing the Launch Instance button. We start by defining a name for our new virtual machine, cPouta in this case. Then we define the size or the flavor of the virtual machine to be created. In this case we choose flavor standard X large, which is actually bigger flavor than what we used when we created the snapshot. From the instance boot source menu we define that we are going to boot from a snapshot. This adds a snapshot menu which we can use to select the snapshot we want to use. In this case we have just one snapshot, my cPouta VM, that we are going to use as a boot source. And finally we go to the Access and Security section there in the launch process and first select the key to be used. We use the cPouta key again here, and then we can also already add the security groups that we are going to use for our new virtual machine, and then we'll launch it. The launching process takes again some time. You can go to the Instances view and check how the virtual machine is starting. When the new virtual machine is up and running, we can associate the floating IP for the machine. We choose Associate Floating IP and select an IP address. In this case we use the same IP address as we used previously. We also link the volume that we previously used to this new virtual machine. To do that, we use command attached volume. In this case, the volume list has just one volume available. There we have the data from the previous example. We can now connect to the virtual machine we just launched with the same SSH command that we previously already used. Now here we used both the same IP address and same key file for the virtual machine that we launched. So in this case the SSH command is exactly the same as in the beginning of this tutorial. And now we have logged into the virtual machine we just launched. However, if we check the volume location, we can notice that there is nothing there in the volume directory. The reason for this is that even though we have attached the volume to the virtual machine, we still have to mount it to the virtual machine. The mounting process is rather simple, but if you don't remember the commands, you can always check them from the cPouta user guide that locates in the Research CFI pages. From chapter 4.2 we first pick the command that we can use to check the attached volumes in our virtual machine. We run the sudo parted-l command there in our virtual machine, and now we can see that the volume is locating in place /dev/vdb. As we are now using a volume that has already earlier been used, we skip the parts where the partitioning and file system has been created and go directly to the mounting command. The disk mounting process requires super user privileges, so we have to use sudo command with the mount command, and then we define that we mount a disk in location /dev/vdb1 to directory /media/volume. Now we can see that in the volume directory we have a directory called test data, which contains the files that were used there in the previous virtual machine, which was attached to this volume. As we are now using a snapshot that has cPouta package installed and the data volume attached and mounted, I can now launch a similar cPouta command that was launched in the previous video. However, during the launching we now used a bit larger virtual machine flavor, so we have now a bit more memory and computing capacity available in our environment.